It is streaming. CPU is less than 10%. 5 megabits per second. No drop frames. Looking good. I think we are going. How is everyone doing today?
I'm okay.
I've been going nonstop myself.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's all these doctor's appointments. Your daughter's driver. Said,
Daughter's taking driver's ed, and like this morning, I had to take my mom to her ear doctor, and
oh,
I myself
did
have
she?
been to 3 doctors. I went to my regular doctor for my annual checkup, got all the labs done, went to my pain doctor, and I also went to a foot doctor to get custom insoles made, so maybe I can start walking straight and have things be easier on my knee and my hip, which have gotten really bad lately.
Yeah. Your mom went to her ear doctor. Did they have to pull a whole bunch of wax out of her ear?
No, she has hearing aids, and she needs to basically go in and get them tuned up and make sure they're at the right levels and everything.
I was just about to say if she had a whole bunch of ear wax pulled out, you should have recorded it and uploaded it to YouTube. You'll get a lot of views doing that.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, you ever watched like those earwax removal videos?
No, I have not. Strangely, that is not something I've gone seeking out.
Yeah. They're gross, but very oddly satisfying for some reason.
I had mine done a couple of years ago. I could have made a bunch of views, I guess, if I had done that.
Yeah.
I thought that's not the kind of video I want to make.
Yeah.
And Heather's got some interesting times with all of these recalls.
Yeah.
Especially since one of the food recalls, they have it was the frozen waffles. It's the same company that makes the store brand for the Harris Teeter waffles.
Oh, so
her store in particular is getting it.
Yeah.
It's not Harris Teeter's fault. They get it from the supplier, and the supplier just puts the Harris Teeter, the HT Traders brand on it. But yeah, it's still probably not the only store brand though, because it's people are coming and it's like, well, this wouldn't have happened if I bought the name brand. It's like, well, yeah, it would, because they're all made by the same supplier.
And
whatever brand it was that got recalled.
Yep, and McDonald's is going through a recall, and like, what is going on? I think it's just
like 3 people have, an upset stomach and report food poisoning after having eaten something, and the FDA does a recall of it.
Yeah.
They've gotten a real hair trigger about it.
Yeah. And I like how they're treating it like it's this big, like it's almost like a pandemic. And so far, to my knowledge, only 1 person has died.
Yeah.
And it was probably like a really super duper old person that was, let's be real, was probably on their way out anyway.
Or that had something else wrong with them.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all that common that people actually die from food poisoning. But they do all that, and now they want to, but they go and arrest Amish people because, oh, well, we can't have them do it the Amish way because people might get sick.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's look at all these recalls. And let's see how many times people have been made sick by the Amish. Let's compare.
Well, the problem is that, and I've kind of brought this up, is that a lot of the stuff, is so contradictory. It's like you can't eat, you can't, prepare the food that way. That's dangerous. It might make someone sick. Okay, well, I'll put a chemical in it that makes it safe to eat. Oh, you can't do that. That chemical might give them cancer. Well, then what am I supposed to do?
And we got Finding Zen over on Rumble. Yes, I did get that link. It's in the to-do list, but like I said, I've been run ragged. Have you noticed I've been able to get very few videos out compared to what I'd like to do because that's just how busy it's been.
Mm.
I don't see anyone in the YouTube chat. Are we on in YouTube? Is YouTube land working?
I'll refresh. See, wouldn't surprise me if there are people there and it's just crashed, or if they're
I'm trying to reload and see.
yeah, same.
Oh, it looks like it just refreshed to me. Did we just come on YouTube just now? After live streaming for 5 minutes.
Oh, some guy called Connor Seymour says he's here for now.
I am not seeing that. Oh, I see him. Yeah, yeah. Hey, Connor. This isn't our usual time. It's kind of nice to change it up, but I mean, I couldn't do our usual time because of the whole driver's ed thing, but it'll be interesting to, it's kind of interesting to do it at different times and see what kind of different people we get showing up. But I think we lose the regulars when we do.
Yeah.
Felicitations to you as well, Connor. Wonder how many people only know the word salutations from Charlotte's Web.
I mean, that's how I was introduced to the word. And they say you don't learn anything from watching TV and movies. I've learned a few things.
Finding Zen says, hang on, let me get it on the screen. I actually read it. It was, that's how old I am, and they hadn't made the cartoon before I'd read the book. Yeah, Finding Zen says, there's one thing I give credit to CNN. It'll be calling out Lauren Ventrell out on her idiotic 10 Commandments bill. That one with the rest of her co-authors are unfit for public office. Yeah, CNN seems to have gotten really good. They've gotten a lot more skeptical of the left and the Biden-Harris administration than they were. Recalls happen on organic farms, not Amish or conventional farms. We've covered that before. If you buy quote unquote organic, you are like 3 to 5 times as likely to get a foodborne illness than if you just buy, just regularly from the store. Because organic is pretty much a con from the start.
Yeah, because it's so funny. It's like, yeah, it's so funny. It's like there's all these there's all the we put antibiotics in the animals, and there's all these chemicals in there. It's like, yeah, how dare we make our animals healthy and keep them healthy, and how dare we make it so our food will actually last a little bit and it won't rot overnight in our fridge.
Yeah.
Like, no joke, fun fact, one downside about organic farming is that it's actually cruel to the animals, because if the animals get sick and get an infection, the vet can't treat them with antibiotics, because part of the rules of being an organic farm is that you can't use antibiotics. So,
and a lot of animals suffer needlessly. A lot of them even die needlessly. It's incredibly cruel. Now, of course, the factory farming has plenty of cruelties of its own that have been well documented.
Yeah. But there's people that are finding the right balance. I mean, many people have pointed out, it's like you can still do, we can still do mass production, still do that, and not fall for the whole organic thing. It's just,
well, we could just let people buy from local farmers.
Yep.
The ones that have been completely cut off by this whole system. But that would basically mean having to get rid of the USDA. And it would mean having to get rid of the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And I've also mentioned Wickard v. Filburn, which was got to be the most boneheaded Supreme Court finding ever. But of course, they don't want to give that up, because that's a lot of power for them.
Yep.
When your activity can be considered to be interstate commerce, when it's not interstate and it's not commerce, and you're just using it for your own purposes.
Yeah. And so
what's Michael Moore done this time, Zen? He's talking about, I wish Michael Moore would shut his sanctimonious hypocritical trap. And
Yeah.
admit that he isn't the hot shit he thinks he is and doesn't know what he's talking about most of the time. Yeah, that's true. That's very
I
true.
remember when he made that documentary about Donald Trump, and I posted a comment on the trailer for it, and I said, "Oh, I think I know how this Donald Trump documentary is gonna go. It's gonna go something like this: I am making a documentary that exposes the truth behind this fascist man. Hey, you over there, you look into the camera and say Donald Trump killed my mother. Uh, Donald Trump killed my mother. Yeah. Now say Donald Trump ate my baby. What? Say it! Donald Trump ate my baby!
Why do you
You
want
don't
me to
get that?
say Donald Trump ate my baby? We got it. We got it.
Yeah. Well, if you're wondering, in case you're wondering, it's a Team America joke.
Oh, okay. Been a long. I
Yeah.
didn't see that movie since it first came out. I didn't care that
Yeah.
much for it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but proof that socialists are not the champions of porn sexual freedom. Oh, no, 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 no. They were the worst. They were the worst at banning porn and sexual stuff and
Oh,
things like that.
oh yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. That's so funny,
Because sexual expression is a huge form of liberation, and socialists do not want that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The only difference is the only difference between an ultra evangelical Christian and a liberal socialist is the reason for why they hate porn. Hate porn. The Christian hates it because ooh, it's sinful and it's against God and it's supposed to be and it's not love and the socialist says ooh, it's ooh, sex and porn is degrading to women.
And I mean, look at how they complain about it more the more freedom women get.
Yeah.
Women decide to wear bikinis at the beach. And oh,
Yeah.
that's horrible. That's the patriarchy. And women get to basically do self-produced porn with Pornhub and OnlyFans and things like that. And oh, there's exploitation. Whereas before, being, in the porn industry, where they were just being pushed around from one producer to another like a piece of meat, that was better.
Yeah, there was actually a really funny there was actually really one funny a funny thing I saw and it was from a feminist who had some radical ideas and many SJWs were calling her a turf for obvious reason, and she brought up a pretty good point saying, you know what really baffles me about the whole trans thing and all that? How come if a girl wants to dress pretty in pink and all the girly stuff, people say that she's promoting an unhealthy, stereotype, but when a guy wants to dress up in a pink frou-frou glittery dress, everyone goes, "Yeah, you go, girl."
Yeah, a girl wants to do it. It's the Cinderella complex or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
It's because
I've,
it's because she's been brainwashed by the patriarchy into a standard of beauty and all that.
no, girls. I know it's hard to believe people, but girls want to look pretty. They want to look nice. I mean, I'm pretty sure Heather's done this to you. I'm pretty sure there's been plenty of times where you're planning on going out and you're stuck there for 10 minutes because Heather's in the bathroom going, "Shane, honey, what dress should I wear? Should I wear this one or should I wear that one?"
Actually, Heather's pretty good about that. She just, picks something that looks good and goes. She's not one of the
Yeah.
ones that
So
has
she
to spend 2 hours trying to figure out what she's gonna wear.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a pragmatist.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who had chicken pox at a year old, I don't want children to get sick. Yeah, I had it at 5. I
Oh,
vaguely remember it, but it was not fun. I
oh
mostly
yeah.
remember itching.
Yeah, I've heard that's another thing too I hate about some of those cartoons with how they portray chicken pox, the kid's just really itchy and all that, but other than that he's fine. But I've heard from people that do remember having it saying no, it's nothing like that.
No, it was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And children
Yeah.
die from it.
Oh yeah. And it's so funny how parents are like, well, if we give them to when they're younger, they'll be safe because they'll be less likely to get it when they're older, and therefore they won't get shingles. That's not what shingles is, people.
No, if you get chicken pox, that's when you get shingles.
Yeah.
because shingles is you have the varicella zoster virus, your body beats it down, but it stays dormant, and then comes back later in life as varicella herpes.
Yeah. I'm not gonna
Or
lie, I still
herpes
kind of
zoster,
hate.
whichever way that goes. One of them changes to herpes. Herpes zoster from varicella. I don't remember. One of the words changes to herpes.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie though, it kind of really irritates me when people are like, "Ha ha, you get herpes on your face when you have a cold sore." It's like 90% of all humanity has herpes. It's like
Yeah.
it's a super duper communicable virus, you know.
That doesn't mean you have the sexually transmitted version of herpes.
And yeah, that's another thing too that people fail to realize. Herpes isn't like, if I recall correctly, herpes itself isn't a virus. It's a class of viruses. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the virus that causes shingles. There's the one that causes chickenpox. There's the one that causes the cold sore in your mouth. There's the one that you
Strep
know.
throat. Strep throat is another example.
I thought that was caused by the strep bacteria.
The first time you get it, it is. But it can lie dormant and come back on its own. And when it does, I think it gets reclassified as herpes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not about the virus, it's about what it does.
Oh yeah.
Viruses are weird taxonomically. The genus species thing doesn't work like it does.
Yeah, because viruses are weird because it's like they're alive, but they're not alive. They change and mutate, but they don't, like, I mean, there's still debate from some scientists, saying exactly what viruses truly are and what's their purpose, from an evolutionary standpoint.
Well, and the problem is, in the whole, are they alive or are they not? The whole life, not life thing isn't as black and white as people have thought throughout history. They thought they were, like distinct categories. There are living things and there are non-living things, and you can't go from one to the other. But no, it turns out there's a whole lot of question marks in the middle. Like,
Yep.
Is this thing alive? Is that thing alive? How is that classified?
Yep. I think we've had a conversation, and I think we've had a conversation about this on a previous podcast. But the funny irony is that some people are against some people are against modern medicine because it's like, well, I realize that this common medicine suppresses the immune system, but if you're sick, don't you want the immune system to be strong? And I've actually heard many doctors point out the funny irony is that the reason why there's so many diseases that make humans sick and why they're so deadly is ironically because we have an overreactive active immune system.
That's the only reason anyone ever gets sick and die from COVID. It's not the virus. It's your immune system fighting the virus. Someone described it. I forget who it was, but someone described it as like there's a burglar in your house. So to get the burglar to go away, you're going to set fire to the place.
Yeah.
That's your immune system, basically.
Yeah. Your immune system is that cliche, is that paranoid general from, the Cold War movie that says, oh, the only way we got to stop this threat is we got to nuke it.
Well, you're just trying to make it an unlivable environment for them. Of course, you're making it an unlivable environment for your own cells as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason why, ironically, when it comes to viruses, the general treatment for general virus, treatment is, just, slightly suppress the immune system a little bit so it's not doing that. Yeah, so it's not inflamed.
It's like you give them steroids to take down the inflammation because inflammation is something else your body does to try and get it away, or a fever. You get this high fever that's really dangerous, but again, it's like, I want you out of my house, so I'm setting fire to it. That's basically what it is. Yeah, it is not like the creationists describe it as this perfect little machine that's getting rid of. No, it isn't.
No.
I
actually remember reading like a story. It was like supernatural stuff and all that, and there was actually a story about a person who's immune to every single disease in the world, and when they did a study, they found out why, and it's because he can telepathically communicate with his immune system. So if he catches a disease, all he needs to do is look at the disease he's been infected with, and he just tells his immune system, and they automatically know what to do. Because that's another thing, that people fail to realize is that, we pretty much can our immune system can in theory counter every single disease out there. The problem is that there's no way to actually determine what type it is, and the only thing the immune system can do is collect what they have, bring it to the thyroid gland, and hopefully that they can realize, oh, I know what this is. I know what this is. It's a cold virus. Oh yeah, we've got antibodies for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a matter of, can your immune system, get it to your body and figure out, what's causing it before the worst happens.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Did I ever tell you this one funny thing? I saw a debate one time. They were talking about zombie viruses and all that, and some people are like, why is it always a virus that has to cause the zombies when a virus actually would when the nature of a virus would actually mean a zombie in the way we think about it would actually be impossible. Why not a bacteria or something? And one person said, yeah, but bacteria can be treated with antibiotics. Viruses can't. And one guy had the best answer. He's like, okay, yeah, try taking penicillin. We have a MRSA infection. See how that goes.
See,
Yeah,
that's why I like the idea of it being parasitic,
yeah.
because those can be resistant to a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, I mean, if
yeah,
it's a virus, the idea is of a zombie is you're dead, but you're still moving around. But a virus requires your cells to be alive to be
yeah.
functioning. So as soon as you would die, the zombie virus would stop.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, they try to make these things where it's like, well, you see, it injects your cells, and then the virus, regenerates the cells. Like, that's not what viruses do. They infect your cell. They trick it into producing the virus. Then the virons, are mass produced, and eventually they break out, destroying the cell, and they spread to other cells.
Yeah, but if your cells are dead, then it can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, by that point, I agree. Just make it supernatural.
Yeah. It's an act of
Yeah,
God, yeah.
yeah,
That was kind of the idea, that they were people going around without a soul. They had died and their soul had left their body, but their body was still alive.
yeah. Of course, we now know that. Yeah, yeah. Actually, many anthropologists now believe that zombies, at least in the way we think, weren't actually meant to be like a living dead ghoul or something. Rather, it actually might have been an allegory for slavery from the Haitians.
There's just been so much of that that's messed up. What a lot of people think of as voodoo isn't.
Oh
Like the
yeah,
whole thing about the voodoo doll, you got the doll and you stick needles in it and it really hurts the person. That is not a voodoo thing. That's European
yeah,
witchcraft.
yep. I have seen interviews with people that have done like voodoo, that they do practice voodoo, and people ask them, like, is it true that voodoo witch doctors can curse you and all that? It's like, yeah, we can, but we don't use dolls. Rather, we burn some herbs, and we do some incantations on what we want to do, and hopefully the spirits hear our call. And, like, let's say you wronged us, so we want you to go bald. We'll just burn some sage and ask the spirits, go to this person and attack their hairline so they'll turn bald. That's really more what it's like, basically.
Whereas European witchcraft is more of the sympathetic magic, which, fun fact, is exactly where we get homeopathy from.
Yeah.
Homeopathy is not medicine, it's sympathetic magic.
Yep.
Right, Zen's giving me a lot more stuff to copy and paste ideas for videos, which I always appreciate.
Speaking of magic, it's also funny how there's a lot of new age people, converting to paganism. But it's kind of the irony. About paganism. Paganism is not a religion. It's really a catch-all. It's really a catch-all term for any pre-Christian religion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like fun facts. Some sects of some sects of Orthodox Judaism is technically considered a pagan religion because some of those sections of Judaism were founded hundreds of years before Christianity was even a thing.
Oh yeah. It's just
Yeah,
it's one of those nonsense words that they come up with to mean the not we.
yeah,
You know, like barbarians. If
yep.
you weren't a good, civilized Greek, you were a barbarian.
Oh yeah.
When statists bring up, this is Mr. Merchant, how the rich would take control of a stateless society, what would prevent them from buying up all the land that is available for purchase? Basic economics. Because the
Yeah,
more they buy
yeah.
it, the more expensive it's going to get.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like fun fact, if you play the game Monopoly, by the proper rules, not by the home rules, you'll realize that contrary to popular belief, you can't necessarily buy everything.
Well, you can under the rules of Monopoly, but they're kind of contrived. Like
Yeah,
all of the units always cost the same amount no matter what.
yeah. I think there was like one guy that tried to make a more economic, realistic version of Monopoly where stuff like that happens. And now, granted, for obvious reasons, they're still, the prices are still technically set for obvious reasons, but they do fluctuate, depending on how many are there. But to be fair, Monopoly, it still has some ideas, right? Because while it is true that the ultimate goal is to buy everything and send the other players to the poorhouse, the fact of the matter is, if you play it properly by the rules, you'll find it's actually a lot harder as the game advances.
And you're only going to be able to do that by making deals with the other players.
Yep. It's one rule that often gets ignored, but it's actually very crucial to the game Monopoly is this idea that oh, you landed on some land that hasn't owned. I don't want to buy it. Buy it. Okay, your turn's over next turn. Nope. If the player refuses to buy it initially, it goes up for auction, and all the players, including the one that rejected, has to place a bid on it. That's actually a common strategy professional Monopoly players, yes, those are a thing, do in the game is if there's a property on the game that they really want, but it's a little too rich for them, they deliberately skip over it, hoping they can buy it at a cheaper price at the auction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if someone else gets it, but it's the only one they have, they don't have the monopoly. So when they get in straits, they have to mortgage it. And then you can work out a deal with them to pay off the mortgage and buy it from them cheap.
Although I will say this, it's one rule about Monopoly that kind of breaks the game and what prevents Monopoly from actually being a good educational material for economics is that rule that says if you land on a space of property that you don't control, you have to pay money to the other player. When in real life, you don't got to do that. Yeah.
No, you're just going by.
Yeah. Who forces you to spend money? At the Silver Hat Hotel. Nobody forces you to do that.
Hakeem is trying to deny Tiananmen Square. Didn't someone post that in the Discord? There have been a couple of really bad Hakeem videos lately.
Oh, my personal favorite review of the Tiananmen Square is when people say, well, yes, the Tiananmen Square thing did occur, but here's the thing. The people weren't protesting for freedom and democracy. They were protesting because the government was going away from Maoism and they wanted to keep their Maoism.
That was not it.
Yeah.
Not even remotely.
Yeah. Yeah, if I recall correctly, the primary thing they wanted was political reforms because the economic reforms contributed to the protests, but it wasn't rejecting the reforms because it's capitalism, we don't want to be capitalist. Rather, it was the whole so now we're allowed private property and ownership. Can we get more political freedoms like freedom of speech and open elections and no longer a single party state? And the Communist Party was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And another thing too that often gets ignored is that shortly after the Tiananmen Square protests, the Chinese Communist Party went back on a lot of the reforms because there were a lot of highlighters that said, "Oh, see, this is what happens when you give when you give freedom to the people, they turn into wild animals and they start raping and killing each other. That's why we gotta have a strong centralized authority in place.
They did the same thing more recently after all the Hong Kong protests.
Oh
See,
yeah.
that's why we have to take Hong Kong back.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's why the LAPD is the way it is. It's because of the LA riots.
Yep. I
Like you know,
remember
like
those.
it brings it reminds me of what that one I remember that I don't remember who it was, but there was one civil rights activist leader who said, listen, what happened to Rodney King was horrible and it was a tragedy, but people don't freaking burn down Los Angeles because of it, because the people of Los Angeles didn't do that. I remember when what was his name? Was it Eric Gardner, the guy that got strangled to death by that one cop for selling cigarettes?
Yeah.
Was it Eric Gardner?
Yeah. Eric
I
Garner.
remember one time they were holding a protest, and guess where they were holding the protest? Was it outside City Hall? Was it outside the NYPD precinct building? No, it was outside an NBA studio, and many people were like, why? Like they were blocking people from going in to see their favorite basketball team and all that. And many people were like, listen, guys, we're sad what happened to Eric Gardner, but we're trying to watch a basketball game. I paid tickets for that. Let me through.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the really sad thing that really pisses me off about society is when, like, yes, the state is corrupt and all that, but the people that are so-called fighting against the state aren't any better. It's like, we've got an evil, fascist, oppressive government, so let's overthrow them and replace them with a communist government.
Yeah, they
But
just
won't
want
let
to
it
put
be.
they just want to put their own form of dictatorship in.
Yeah.
That's
Why
why
I'm not
that's
a
why
big fan.
most revolutions don't work.
Yeah.
That's what was
Yeah,
so
that's the
unique about the American Revolution.
yeah.
It's
It's
pretty much the
because
only one where they didn't do that.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't perfect, and there were some, and there were still some, hiccups along the way. But they kind of had an idea that says, well, listen, we got to have a government, but we don't want to set up our own monarchy because then what would be the point? Literally, the whole point, is that it's the same thing with the French Revolution. I don't know why the French Revolution is so romanticized when the fact of the matter is, when you really look at it from the grand scheme of history, it was a disaster, and the French people really got screwed over by it.
No, it was horrible.
Yeah. It's like,
Animal Farm
yay,
in a
we.
nutshell is I'm going to have to reread Animal Farm because I think the way it works is the pigs start out in charge and then they overthrow the pigs and put the dogs in charge.
No, that's not what happened. I remember it. Basically, what happened is after they overthrow the humans, they're not entirely sure what to do because it's like, because the problem was that after they get rid of the humans and all, then like, yay, we're launching the animalist revolution. Then they're all left behind saying, okay, now what do we do? Because the humans did everything. They have no clue how to do the farm tasks. Now the pigs take over because at the time they were the most intelligent, so they figured, we're the smarter ones, we kind of know how to read and all that, so we'll take it over and we'll try to, help the others do that. But over there, they become more and more corrupt until eventually, yeah, they become the rulers, and animalism becomes the same thing they sought to destroy.
Yeah, but I thought there were a couple like other iterations where they tried like a couple of other animals and then the pigs ended up taking over again.
No, it was pretty much the pigs right from the ground up.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, the pigs did take in some dogs and they turned them into like a secret police force, which was meant to be an allegory for the NKVD. But
Uh,
yeah, it was the pig. And like, and it's one thing that a lot of adaptations of the book,
you're
adaptations of the
cutting
book.
out.
Oh, sorry. Is it good now?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, as I was saying, a lot of the things that adaptations of the book get wrong, though, is they often portray it as animalism was flawed, but it could have worked. But then Napoleon came over and ruined everything. Whereas in the book, animalism was doomed to fail right from the beginning. Like Snowball, the pig, the first pig in charge, he had good ideas, but they were failing. The perfectly good example is what happens to the windmill. See, in almost all iterations of the windmill, it's destroyed by the previous owner of the farm. Whereas in the original book, it fell apart. It collapsed under its own weight because the animals did a piss poor job at constructing it.
That's why I'm going to have to reread it. I think I've seen too many adaptations since I read it to
Yeah,
properly remember it.
yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. George Orwell. A lot of people have really misinterpreted his books.
He came very close then to disavowing socialism there at the end.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
He
he
was
was close. Like so many people love to say, "Oh, but George Orwell was a devout socialist." Yeah, in his early days, but even then, he wasn't into like he wasn't into the whole national socialism or internationalism like communism. Oh yeah, I think the only reason why Orwell never fully gave up on socialism was because he died in 1950. Had he lived to 1954 with the fall of Stalin, and when finally a lot of the stuff that was going on in the Soviet Union got exposed, he would have been like, "Yeah, you know what? Screw socialism. I know what. I don't know what I saw in that."
Mr. Merchant says, "Why no protesters ever go after the government buildings?" And this is what I thought, like after the first of like the major Black Lives Matter protests, it's like they're complaining about racist police killing black people, which good, they should. But why the hell are they burning down an AutoZone?
Yeah,
What did AutoZone do?
yeah. And not to mention, let's be real here, people. Yes, there's racist police department, but racism is not the core issue with the police department. It's a symptom.
The core issue is a lack of accountability for the police.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lack of accountability because because here's the thing, people. You can deny it all you want, but white people get abused by the police too.
Oh yeah, plenty
You
of
know,
examples.
there was that really sadly forgotten case of I really forgot that guy's name, but I know there was a video of it where there was that one homeless white guy, and because he was homeless and he had untreated schizophrenia, he was having hallucinations, and the police were trying to arrest him, and it was pretty clear right from the video that he was struggling to hang in there, mentally. And he even said, "Hey, I might be acting up. I can't comprehend what you're saying." And the police were just like, you do what we say right now." And he couldn't comprehend. And when he complied, they say, "Yep, he's in compliance. Get him." And they beat him to death.
You're thinking of Kelly Thomas?
I think that might have been it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was more like they just wanted to have fun beating a guy up. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And Daniel Shaver was the guy in the hotel.
Yeah.
Well, he might
I
have
also
had a gun.
remember-
He was in his freaking underwear.
Yeah. Yeah, if he's in his freaking underwear, it's going to be a lot harder to conceal a gun. And even if he did have a gun in his underwear, you would have seen it. Yeah.
It would have been a bulge, and it wouldn't have been that bulge.
Yep.
He's not happy to see you.
Yeah. There was also, I forgot who the guy was, but I saw this one video about YouTube. It was a list of compilation of police brutality, and there was one homeless guy where he was he was clearly, mentally ill, and he was having an episode, and, he pulled out a knife, and the police shot him in the abdomen, and he fell over because, unknown to the police at the time, they damaged his spine, so he was knocked out and paralyzed, and they kept saying, "Okay, put your hands behind your back." And this guy's clearly, he's out, he's no longer a threat. And you know what the police did? They said, "He's not complying, what should I do?" And they shot him again. And no joke, the guy was flat on the ground. He was not moving. I think he was dead by that point. And they were still like, "Get on the ground now, put your hands behind your back. He's not complying."
That's crazy, but that's what happens when you give a bunch of people and give them authority.
Yep.
Just like the pigs and the dogs we were talking about. And kind of back what you were saying about the national international socialism, it put me in mind of a really good TIK history video he recently posted that just really laid out so much better than anything else I have ever seen why Nazism was so compelling to so many people because he had the three things. He had there was nationalism, there was racism, and what was the third? Was it socialism? And he said, anyway, you don't need to believe any more than one of these. You don't need to believe like all three. You don't even need to believe two out of the three. If you just believe one of them, then that's enough for Nazism to pull you into the other two.
Yeah. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I think one of the reasons why Nazism is so demonized compared to blood or political ideologies, because let's be real here, in the grand scheme of things, Nazism was kind of it was bad, but when you compare like what was going on in the Soviet Union and previous other massacres and regimes from history's past, it was small apples.
The
I think the
Nazis,
reason,
the Nazis didn't do anything Martin Luther wouldn't have done if he'd had the power and the technology.
oh yeah, oh yeah, I mean, I think the real reason why Nazism is so demonized and why everyone demonizes them is because I think it's a little bit of projection, because people fail to realize at the time Nazi Germany was praised by many world leaders and even some economists at the time. They were saying, "Oh yeah, finally Hitler got it right. He figured out a way so it can be socialist but without being communist, and they can satisfy everyone. Germany's on its way to peace and prosperity." And instead, he led his nation to war, to violence and death. And the sad reality, and people want to deny it, but a lot of what Adolf Hitler was lobbying for and implementing, it's kind of what a lot of nations, wanted to implement and still do want to implement.
But
But they can't.
that's the thing I
What?
didn't like about the Star Trek episode about the Nazis, because I forget what it was called, but there was an episode where one of the Star Trek captains had been to a planet and everyone was just in poverty, and he decided to uh, make them a more prosperous nation. And he did it by basically installing Nazism. And when Kirk and the Enterprise crew get there, it turns out they're just keeping this guy drugged, and the guy who's really in power with the programs and everything, and, crushing the lesser races and everything, is in power. And McCoy finally brings the guy around, and Kirk talks to him and says, well, it was the most efficient regime in history. It was the best chance these people had. And the problem was seen as the only problem with Nazism is that the wrong person would get in power, which is a good point, but it also implies that the Nazis were efficient and would have worked otherwise, and they weren't. They were destroying their country's economy.
Yeah, that's
That would
another
be
thing
like
that I
the
like
worst
about.
thing you could do to an economy.
That's another thing I like about TIK history is that he reviews other ways that Nazism was wrong. And because you see, when people do documentaries about Nazi Germany, they only want to talk about the Holocaust and the racism, whereas TIK history was pointing out, apart from the fact that the Nazis were racist and they were killing Jews and all that, they were terrible at managing their economy. They were creating their own shortages. They were poorly manufacturing their systems. They were basically using IOUs to pay for everything, which crashed the German economy. Contrary to what Wolfenstein: The New Order portrays, if the Nazis had won the war, they probably wouldn't have lasted 10 years, let alone 1,000
No,
years.
they were already crashing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They
I mean,
they
that's
were
the
getting they
reason.
were getting to the point where they really couldn't fight the war anymore.
Yeah. And I mean,
And
TAK history.
the big fear about, oh, if we don't develop a nuke, Hitler and the Nazis will. They weren't even in the ballpark of being able to get a nuke.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it went from well, we got to get a nuke to make sure that Hitler doesn't get a hold of it, to well, we don't want to have to invade Japan, so let's just nuke them into Japan. And I've actually brought up a pretty good point, and I still have yet to see some of those military historians answer this. Why not just not invade Japan? Just kick Japan out of all the foreign territories, kick them out of China, and once all the Japanese army has retreated to Japan, just stop and say, "You lost Japan. We're going to call this war off. We're not going to do." pursue anything. If you do this again, though, you know what'll happen.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why these conflicts continue. It's not because it's not because the war's not won. It's how they're won. It's because one nation insists on, oh, we can't just stop fighting. We need an absolute unconditional surrender,
Yep.
which is basically we want the nation to bend over and just take it while we rape and pillage their countryside. Hmm. Fighting Zenith says Hitler sounds more like Edwin Edwards than most people realize. Oh yeah, I mean, there was that one troll that literally went to a Black Lives Matter slash Occupy, or I can't remember if it was Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street, and he literally took quotes from Mein Kampf, but just rearranged some of the words around and switched some words, and people were cheering him on, and they said, "Yeah, we support that."
Yeah,
And then the
it was Black
annotation,
Lives Matter. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, seriously, just take some of the stuff that Black Lives Matter said just take what a lot of they're saying, but replace the words like whites and black people with Jews and Aryans, and you'll start to realize, holy crap, maybe these people we don't want them in power.
Yep. It all
Yeah.
depends on just who you label as the bourgeoisie.
Oh yeah.
Is it the Jews? Is it the farmers? Who is it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing too that so many people like to say. I mean, and really, TIK history. That's the thing I like about it is because he points that out that people fail to realize. Like he also asks those questions that nobody ever wants to talk about. Is like a lot of people like to go, oh, but if the Nazis, were pro socialism, why did they hate communism and hate Marx? And it's like, because if you read what they said, it's because, believe it or not, from the Nazis' point of view, the communists were not genuine socialists; they were puppets for the Jews.
Yeah.
Like if you
TIK
look at
history also did a good job laying it out in that same video.
yeah. He's an interesting guy because, like, even though a lot of his videos are like close to an hour long, they don't feel like an hour for the most part. Maybe it's his laid back, chill British accent.
Maybe.
And I do like how he does put in some dry, sarcastic humor in there.
But man, does he drop the receipts.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, he is thorough.
oh yeah. Like no
But
joke, I
that's why
posted
his videos are an hour long or more.
yeah. By the way, what's the dumbest argument I've ever heard when I posted TIK History's videos on forums discussing this is they go, well, he's not a mainstream historian and he's not, using, like proper, sources and all that. And I'm like, he's listing his sources, many of whom come from actual people.
Yeah, he's going back to original sources.
Yeah. It's just cope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people can't cope with the idea that, wait a minute, what we were taught in history was wrong, and in actuality, the Nazis had an ideology that's more similar to what I want. They can't accept that. You know,
It's kind of like some of those weird debates you see in the talk pages of Wikipedia where, they have, some flunky working for a fake news outlet, the Guardian or whoever, and they're saying all of this crap, and someone tries to revise the page where they go back to the original thing where it was either originally reported or documented or what the person said or whatever, going back and getting it, from the horse's mouth, from the original source, and they cut it down and say no original research. But that's not original research. That's going back to the primary source.
like when after you made that video about Lysander Spooner, several people actually tried to go to the Wikipedia article to correct it and using some of the sources, but the editor said no, Lysander Spooner was a socialist because this, that, and they're like, but these are the actual quotes, and this clearly isn't a guy who's a socialist. And they say, no, he was a member of First International, which was a socialist organization, therefore he's a socialist.
Even though he was there before the the blue red the black red split, and he was part of the black.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, First International wasn't even a socialist movement. It was more like an enlightenment organization that was advocating for free trade and all that.
Yeah, it was only socialist after the black
Yeah,
red
then it yeah,
split.
then it got taken then it got taken over by the proto Marxists, before Marxism was a thing.
Yeah.
Hmm. Speaking of Marx, I love the video that TIK History did on Karl Marx, and yeah, sorry people, Karl Marx was not the guy you think he was.
Yep.
Yeah.
He had a lot more in common with Hitler than people want to admit.
Oh yeah. They'll give Hitler some credit. At least when push came to shove, Hitler at least, did something. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unlike Marx, who just sat there on his lazy ass.
Oh yeah. Yeah, people fail to realize people fail to realize, the Communist Manifesto was partially written by Frederick Engels, and the reason why was because if it was up to Karl Marx on his own, the Communist Manifesto never would have been published.
Yeah.
Like TK History brought this up in his video. Like, we have letters from Frederick Engels and Karl Marx where Engels is saying, Marx, listen, I'm investing a lot of money in your book. I need you to get that manuscript ready so I can mass produce it and publish it. And Marx basically either blowing him off or pulling the whole, don't worry, it's coming, it's coming. It's also really sad how Marx treated his wife, basically.
Yeah.
Because, like, his wife, from what I understand, she believed in, the idea he was preaching, but she also pointed out, but, Carl, we have to be pragmatic. We need to think of our children. You can still be a communist and preach that, but I think until, we reach that utopian society, you should get a job so we can at least feed ourselves. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's selling out to the bourgeois.
Always some excuse.
Oh, yeah. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some of those, socialists, and it's pretty clear, like, look, I don't want to sound like a boomer, but it's clear they're lazy. Does that Zenith guy have anything else to say, or?
Let's see. Look at Edward, 16 years as criminal in chief. And he showed TIK History's Karl Marx video to one of his mom's cousins.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's just hard to. I mean, every time someone's tried to do a takedown of it, he's come right back with a detailed point by point reason.
Oh yeah,
why they're wrong.
He's literally done response videos to the critics where he points them out.
They're like 5 hours long or something. And
Yeah,
he's just dropping receipt after receipt.
yeah. I even like that video that he did when people asked him if he was a libertarian or anarcho capitalist, and I think he had a genuinely, understandable response. His response was, I sympathize with a lot of libertarian slash anarcho capitalist beliefs, but the problem is that, you know, I'm more of like a historian and an amateur historian. I haven't read enough of their philosophies to fully comprehend what they're doing, so I'm not really gonna take a certain opinion until I actually get more. But he did say he's open. If there's any ANCAPs or libertarians that want to talk to me about it, I'm willing to hear them out when I get the chance.
That's cool.
Yeah, because I mean, you've brought it up before. There is nothing wrong with just saying, I'm not going to take a stance on something because I don't have the information for it.
But I mean, I also kind of see, because you kind of end up talking at odds when you get into economics concepts. Because in my view, when you talk economics, economics is a science, and you should use the words as they're defined by the scientific community. You know, we've done that before with plenty of them. But he's coming at it from a standpoint of history.
Yeah.
And so, like, what has capitalism meant throughout history versus what's the,
Yeah.
you know, the economics definition of the term. That's
Yeah.
where you can talk past each other.
Yeah. I mean, it is unfortunately it is a complicated issue, and that's another problem. And that's another problem with with the whole critical race theory and all that. And is because let's be real here, the biggest issue, and this is something nobody wants to talk about. Some people are is that they're literally basically saying, "Oh, words can mean whatever, whenever, so therefore we shouldn't have a strict definition." And it's like, well, then we've completely lost logic. Then
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll never forget my art professor doing this to one of the students, and he had just done this kind of nothing thing. And it was like, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" It was kind of the thing that passes for art in a lot of museums today. But
yeah,
it was like, "What are you doing?" It was like, "Well, it's just a thing. It's just art." Well, it's like, "Well, what is it art? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to evoke out of me?" And it's like, "Well, it's just art." It's like, anyway, it's like, and so he came back with the whole, "Well, what is art? Well, how do you define what art is? You can't see what art is." And so the professor just pointed at the table and says, "Okay, I'm going to call this a chair. I'm going to."
yeah,
I pulls up his water bottle. "I'm going to call this a sheep." You know, we
yep,
have to have words that have meanings. That's the whole point of a word, is that it means something. And if you say that you have this word art that doesn't mean anything, then you don't actually have a word.
yeah. I mean, I think you've brought it up before one time. I think it was in your "How to Argue for Feminism" video, but like a perfectly good example, if everything in the world, if everything in the known universe was a shade of green, then the irony is that the quote unquote green as a concept wouldn't exist, because the reason why we have concepts like colors is to differentiate them from other colors.
Yep.
But if everything was a shade of green, then green paradoxically wouldn't exist, because green would just be another term for everything.
Yep.
Yeah. By the way, fun fact. I once you know how there's that classic philosophy about how is the glass half full or is it half empty, and they use that to determine your personality. I figured out the perfect solution to that question. People ask them, well, is the glass half full or is it half empty? To which I answer, well, it depends. What were you doing before there was water in the glass? If it was
Yep.
empty, then you took a pitcher of water and you filled it up halfway, then it's half full because your intention was to fill it with something. Now, if there's a full glass of water, you pick it up and you drink half of it and set it down, then it's half empty. What was the
Yeah.
intention for the glass?
Yeah, and
That's what the answer
that's
is.
been one proffered solution for it. It's like, what is the temporal state
Yeah,
of the glass, and what's it coming from? What's it going to? You know, what's the intent?
yeah,
You know, what kind of usefulness are you
yeah,
getting from it? Because sometimes the emptiness is the point. Like in a nuclear reactor, you go back to 3 Mile Island. You know, the big problem was they opened up the ECCS valve, drained out too much water, and they exposed the core because they didn't realize that the PORV valve was stuck open. But the reason why they did that is because they didn't want the tank filling too full with water, because you need a cavity in there so that you can have steam. And steam is going to fill up a cavity and pressurize it pretty fast. So you don't want it to fill up too much with water, because you want to leave that room for the steam.
yeah. Fighting Zenith says, "What is white guilt but original sin repackaged and heavily weaponized?"
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I said
Before
that a
he
long time
became
ago. It's original sin.
yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, but I mean, before he became woke and really left his brain out the window, the Amazing Atheist did that really funny, counterintuitive, to how, because he used to be a pretty anti-SJW guy himself before he let Trump derangement syndrome get to him, where he did that one funny video where he pretended to whip himself, and he's like,
Yeah.
"I'm sorry, I'm straight. I'm sorry, I'm a man. I'm sorry, I'm white." Yeah. Yeah, it's just like those, I forgot what they were called, but those like like those Christian extremists from the Middle Ages that felt that you always had to whip yourself because if you felt any sense of pleasure, whether that be happiness or all that, that was clearly a sign you were sinning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We lost so many people, both to Trump derangement system and to Trump worship.
yeah.
Both
I know we
sides just made people completely, lose track of
yeah.
their principles.
Oh yeah. And the funny thing is that so many people are like, well, if you don't like Donald Trump, then why are you constantly defending him? And it's like because the criticism you're coming up from is things that he's not responsible for.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing I kind of had with George W. Bush because the thing is, as a kid, I didn't like George W. Bush, but I commonly found myself defending him, and the reason was because people kept criticizing him for things that he didn't do.
Yeah.
Like they were saying, "Oh, he was a deregulator and he gave all this money to corporations and all that." Okay, well, first of
Tax
all,
cuts for the rich. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, first of all politicians do that, not just George W. Bush. And second of all, no, he didn't. Like I remember one time
He actually did a little less of those things than most politicians.
yeah. Like he was accused of cutting, funding for schools, and that's why schools, in the mid 2000s sucked. But there was actually someone that did some project, and they actually found out that he actually increased spending for schools. The only difference was that he didn't increase it as high as previous presidents had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they kept saying he cut Medicare. Not only did he not cut Medicare at all, he is the reason why Medicare covers prescriptions.
yep. And of course, let's not forget the classic. Oh, he was a warmonger who led us into Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses. Obama takes over and continues the war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, and at the
Nothing.
time, the Democrats like Hillary Clinton were every bit as gung ho for the war as he was.
Yeah,
In
they didn't
fact,
start. Yeah,
if anything, they were the main ones pushing for it. Because before 9/11, George W. Bush had campaigned on and was pretty much running on a humble foreign policy where you don't go around doing that. And the Democrats were like, no, we need to go to war with Iraq. We need to go to war with Afghanistan, which is what Al Gore actually campaigned on. Then 9/11 hits. And of course, everyone goes crazy.
Yep. Yeah, it's like people. If you're going to criticize a president, actually criticize them for genuine things they did. If you only criticize them for things the political ads tell you, then I'm sorry, you're just as ignorant and dumb as the other side that you're criticizing.
Yep.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, one thing that's really pissing me off about the whole Harris campaign is all they're talking about is abortion, 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 and I'm just like, what about our government spending? Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's
And
I think it's an important.
the only right that matters to women is abortion. Women don't
Yeah.
care about any other rights.
Oh yeah. And I've seen one person point this out in a video. It's like, yay, abortion is now permanently established in the United States and it's 100% legal. Yay! Unfortunately, our economy's gone to shit, so you can't afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Zen says George W. Bush was a smarter JFK. Basically, that's Trump, too.
Yeah.
Trump isn't some like ultra right wing fascist. He's a 1960s Kennedy Democrat.
Yeah, that's what Mentis Wave said when he was reviewing
You
a
cut
lot
out
of
again.
what they were saying. Oh, that's what Mentis Wave said when he was reading a lot of what Trump was promising. And the thing is, he didn't agree with it. He disagreed with a lot of Trump said, but he said, but this isn't an extreme right wing fascist. It's just he's a 1980s Republican.
That was kind of how the Overton window shifted.
Yeah,
if you have a 60s Kennedy Democrat and you just keep them in the same place, the Republicans have had more and more of the big tent. That was one of the big thing in the 80s. They were talking about the big tent, incorporate more people. And whereas the Democrats have become so left and so radical and so narrow that they occupy all this little crammed up area of the spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, another good example is Elon Musk. Everyone likes to say,
Oh yeah.
he's a corporate fascist and all that. But if you actually, because I've seen interviews with him, if you actually sit down and just like have a conversation with him, he actually has a lot of liberal progressive views. But the reason why he's labeled as right wing, and I think he even made his own meme about this, is because the left that he used to be a part of moved so far to the left, while he stood still, that in comparison, yeah, he appeared to be shifting to the right when in reality it was the other way around.
Well, and also look at everything they did to him. Covered all
Yeah.
of this on the podcast. Look at the archives. All of the bogus recalls they did on Teslas. All the stuff they did about Twitter when he was trying to buy it and after he bought it, up to and including, they are still saying that he should be arrested for how he's running Twitter. All the stuff that happened like in Tesla with the Delaware court, the stuff they're doing to him with Starlink for trying to help out people in Hurricane Helene, all of the stuff that the DC and the California politicians and bureaucrats are doing to get in the way of SpaceX. You keep smacking a guy in the head like that, and then you wonder why he goes to the opposition. What did you expect?
Yeah, I
The
mean, it
Biden
reminds me of
administration keeps whacking him left and right, and you're surprised he's gone over to Trump?
yeah, and kind of reminds me of Charlton Heston. If I recall correctly, when he was a young man, he was a staunch, Democrat. He was very progressive and all that, and as he got older and all that, and more involved, and he witnessed the politics in Hollywood change, he became more of a Republican and all that. And he was once interviewed in his old age saying, "So Charlton Heston, why did you leave? Why did you leave the Democrat Party? Why did you go from this youthful progressive to a Republican conservative?" And he said, "I never left the Progressive Democratic Party. The Progressive Democratic Party left me."
It's shades of Davy Crockett. He said,
Yeah.
I have not stopped being a Jacksonian. I am still a Jacksonian, even if Jackson no longer is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's always how it goes.
Yep.
It's good, Zen. I like the way Harry Brown said it. They're just two different wings on the same bird of prey.
Yep.
And it's actually $35 trillion in debt now. It's insane.
And he did a lot of bad stuff. But one quote from Winston Churchill I like. Supposedly this is something was when he was after World War II, when he was trying to run for re-election, and he was a very staunch anti-communist and all that. And people were like, "Oh, but the communists helped us defeat the Nazis." And he says that was because we were at war, but politically they're one and the same. The differences between Nazism and communism are similar to the North and South Pole. One has polar bears, the other doesn't, but they're both frozen hellholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
one
not the
has
exact
polar
quote,
bears,
but
the other has penguins, but still.
Yep. Yeah, but they're still both frozen wastelands that nobody wants to live at.
So, Mr. Merchant, and I'm sorry I didn't see this until after I refreshed it. I have no idea how long this has been there. I think it's stuck. But he says, how do we shift the Overton window to libertarianism? I think we're doing it because as more and more time goes on, more and more, especially the Trump populists, are starting to use libertarian rhetoric. Yep. And all we need to do is keep with it and make them understand, what all of that really means.
Oh, yeah.
Have you considered debunking Laurie Schlegel on Sex Edition? I am not familiar with what she said, so I'm sure there'll be a link. Again, I'll copy and paste all the links you give me and look at it.
Yeah.
Her idiotic writ violates the 4th and 5th Amendments. Oh, the age verification stuff. Yeah, and the first. President Milley actually reduced the size of government, which is what I can say about Jeff Landry.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mentis Wave did a recent video about, libertarianism and all that, and he did say and he did say, the sad reality is that due to the nature of politics, it's really tricky to be fully libertarian. But he did say the best thing we can do is try to implement it where we can. Because like I've seen some people say, it's like, well, even if a libertarian president does get in power, the fact of the matter is a lot of the stuff that would be needed to do it, would require Congress, and we know as hell Congress isn't going to approve. And I say, well, yeah, that is true, but there's one thing the president can do that can stop that can in a way force Congress to become libertarians, and it's actually kind of simple. It's something. Then they're like, what's that? It's exactly what Gary Johnson did when he was governor of New Mexico. Just don't sign anything.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if a bill comes to your office and you don't like the look of it, you veto it. If you don't have time to read it, veto it. If you don't like the title, veto it. Just veto it, veto it, veto it.
And in most states, it works pretty much the same way as it does on the federal level. You would need 2/3 of both houses to override a governor's veto. And that's a lot harder to get.
Oh yeah. Yeah, some people are like, well, what if Congress really wants to pass that bill? Can't they just do that? Which they can, but like you said, it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of resources. And another thing too, and I've heard people say this: a president approving a bill gives it some validity. So if it's ever challenged in the future in a court, they have a much tighter defense. But if the president doesn't, but if it gets passed without the president's signature, sure, a good lawyer in the Supreme Court can point out saying, hey, even the president didn't approve of it. What does that say about the bill? And it might convince the Supreme Court to say, yeah, the president didn't like it. I think this bill's not good.
And people forget there's something else the president can do called a pocket veto, which means he just doesn't do anything. And depending on how things go, this is how the president can ensure that a bill is killed, because the way it works is they send the bill to the president. He has 10 days to do something about it. If he doesn't, it's called a pocket veto. If Congress is still in session, then the bill becomes law without his signature. But if Congress has adjourned, the bill is killed. So especially with all of those last minute things, they try to rush across the president's desk, and get him trying to sign in a panic. If he just does nothing on those, they're done.
Yep.
Oh, what's that? Congress is going to adjourn in 5 days? Okay, I won't do anything.
Okay, yep.
And then see if that makes them, deliberately stay and just wait them out. And then you can wait until day 10, and if they call your bluff, then I guess you can veto it. But
yep.
If they adjourn, it's done.
But yeah, that is one thing the president can do. Like that I've told people is like, because there's a lot of videos out there where people say, well, the president can't really do anything about the economy. Well, he can in some ways. Like I said, one of the reasons why Congress, keeps passing all these ridiculous spending bills is because we let them. They come in with a bill and they say you got to pass this bill, Mr. President. It's a matter of utmost importance. The entire economic and national security of America is dependent on it. And the president takes them at their word, and he signs it.
That's why they always stick so many writers into the NDAA each year. Because we've got to have defense. We've got to get that funded for another year. And then, of course, they stick all the crap in there like, the Real ID Act was one. I forget what some of the others were.
Yeah. Congress, I got a question. This Save the Babies Act you passed me. Why are there so many writers in here that have nothing to do with saving the babies? Well, what do you mean, Mr. President? Like, it says right here in section 42, you want me to approve of Congress of giving $100,000 to the grandchildren of Representative Leghorn of Kentucky. What does that have to do with saving the babies?
Hey, you gave me this Cute Puppies and Rainbows Act, but what it actually does is say Congress can confiscate the cars from anyone whose CEO they don't like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, also, and people, this was an actual writer that happened. Shane actually brought this up in a video. It's like, also another thing in the Save the Babies Act, there's a passage here that says that Congress can approve of $2 million for the Department of the Interior to import polar bear parts from Canada. What does that have to do with saving what does that have to do with saving the babies?
In reality, that was in a flood bill when the Red
Yeah,
River
the Red River,
flooded, and they were
yeah,
passing a relief bill, and there was all these writers in it.
yeah. You brought that up. Like there was like all these things that had nothing to do with the Red River Valley. Like there was one of them was a bill that was about overseeing the United States peacekeeping operations in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Which what does that have to do with the Red River? There was one, where they
There
gave,
was one
where they
where they were going to name a highway after some guy named Frank Tejeda, and it's like, I have no idea who that is, and neither does anyone else. But what
yeah.
does he have to do with flood relief?
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, Shane. Part of me thinks that some of those earmarks are put in there by congressmen and by congressmen that are just pulling a joke because they want to see, hey, let's put this really stupid thing in the bill and see if the president reads it. Yeah,
No, there's always people
yeah.
behind it who are getting the money.
Well, yeah. Because I mean, it's not
Well,
like you. Because I
like
think
that
you'd be.
one where it started out being an FAA Modernization Act, and not
Mm.
only did they take the money away from the FAA, they put so many riders in there about everything else, and they were so excited and they spent so much time doing it, they forgot to name it.
Yeah. I mean, for all its faults, there's one policy that the Confederate States of America had that I think we should implement, and that was that policy they had in their constitution that says if you're going to propose a bill, it must be to one. The title must be based
Yep.
on one cause, and everything in there must be pertained to the title.
One subject at a time. Yep. And
Yep.
if it's
So if you're
not,
gonna
then the entire law is void.
Yep. So if you're gonna pass, the whole Save the Polar Bears Act, there better be, everything in there better be about figuring out a way to save the polar bears, and not about giving, and not about approving money so Senator Leghorn can host a cowboy poetry festival in his home state.
And if it is, then the whole point of then the part about the poetry festival is invalid. If they didn't even put in the part about polar bears in the title, if they just gave it some, cutesy title like the We Love America Act or something like that, and there's no subject at all, whole thing's invalid.
Yep. Speaking of the Civil War, I know we like talking about that a lot, but it's another misconception about the Civil War that some people have because I read it. It was about the Corvin Amendment. A lot of people say that had that been approved, then slavery would have been a permanent fixture within the United States. But after I actually read it, I realized, while yes, it wouldn't have been good for the abolitionists, it wouldn't have necessarily made the United States a permanent slave, nation. It just would have said, the federal government can't do anything about it. If the states want to ban slavery, they were more than free to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was
In
really
fact, one of their complaints was about things like the federal fugitive slave laws, which prevented the states from
yeah,
from doing their own restrictions on that.
yeah.
And Finding Zen says Churchill was responsible for NHS. Man, they just worship Churchill almost as much as they worship the NHS. And he wasn't the worst by any stretch of the imagination, but he does not deserve all of the
Yeah.
lionization that the British give to him. And if,
Yeah, I think it
if
was
he hadn't been, fighting the Nazis in World War II, he probably wouldn't have been.
Yeah, he would have been forgotten about. Yeah.
Because he was actually pretty run of the mill and mediocre.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was an average prime minister. Who's one Speaking of World War II, it's one prime minister that does kind of get a lot of hatred that a lot of historians now believe probably doesn't deserve that. That's Neville Chamberlain. Some people say, well, he was appeasing Hitler and all that. Well, the sad reality is that the reason why he was appeasing Hitler was because, and many historians pointed this out, 1930s England was in no condition to fight the Nazis.
Yeah.
Yeah. France maybe, but not England.
Yeah, because England got hit by the Depression at least as bad as the United States did.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, if anything, the biggest blame mainly relies on France because because a lot of his military historians have pointed out France could have stopped Germany right then and there had they, had they crossed the border, had they went into Germany when Germany invaded and occupied Czechoslovakia, they would have defeated them. But France didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember Seize Seiko, yeah.
Hmm.
Kleptocrats, crooks and poverty pimps.
Hmm.
Man, yes, it's true that the whole colonization thing was not great for Africa, but that's pretty much over. And since then, Africa's been their own worst enemy.
Oh yeah.
They
I
just
mean, I
can't
think the
stop their own countries from being corrupt and vicious and criminal.
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest problem is that, listen, for all the bad stuff it did, there were some good things that came out of colonialism is that it introduced the Africans to things like secular education, the Enlightenment movement and all that. And the problem was that after they gained their independence, they declared, okay, everything that came from Europe, that's colonialist doctrinism and therefore it's bad. So, yeah, all the stuff like enlightenment, free markets and all that, yeah, let's not embrace that. Let's get rid of that. And then they're wondering why their countries are so poor.
Reminds me of Jimmy Carter, hated for the wrong reasons. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, everyone hates him, because of how he handled the Iran hostage crisis, and the boycotting of the Olympics when people are like, what about his disastrous policies that led to the energy crisis?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's not to blame for a lot of the stuff like Nixon's wage and price freezes, but he was so much of a wimp that he didn't do anything about it because he was so afraid that it might
Yeah.
upend the economy even further. Reagan got in and was like, okay, we're just getting rid of these things,
Yeah.
which was the right
Yeah,
move.
contrary to what they taught you in school, the cause of the energy crisis was not the OPEC embargo, and it was not, the quote unquote we reached peak oil fear. It was the government's reaction to the OPEC embargo and the Texas peak oil scare.
Oh, I remember East Timor too. You're bringing back a lot of my childhood there, Zen.
Hmm.
And sure, he deregulated, but it didn't go far enough. Yeah.
Hmm. Hard to believe Jimmy Carter's still alive.
Isn't he
I think
100?
he's like, yep.
I think I remember reading that.
Yep.
It's a sad, sad world where Jimmy Carter gets to live to 100 and Betty White doesn't. I
Yeah.
really wanted her to live to 100.
Yeah. And the funny irony is that if I recall correctly, even though her character was the youngest in the show, she was actually the oldest actress of the Golden Girls.
I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah.
She was playing the oldest, but she was really the youngest. I don't
I don't.
remember.
No, it was the other way around. Yeah. No, she was supposed to be the youngest and she was the oldest. Yeah. And actually, yeah. Here's another fun fact about the Golden Girls. The actress that played Dorothy's mother, she was actually a year younger than B. Arthur. Yeah, she had to wear a wig and use makeup to make herself appear older than she really was.
Can't believe they're
Mm.
trying to make the girls out to be racist. Got them kicked off
Yeah.
of, was it Hulu they were kicked off of? One of them. Because there was an episode where they were trying mud packs and people thought it was blackface.
Oh yeah, of course. The whole thing with blackface too, and I've actually heard this from people too, is like people say it's like, no, you can't do blackface no matter what. Okay, well, what if I'm making a documentary? What if I'm making a documentary about a famous jazz singer? Now he was white, but he commonly played, but he played but he played black roles, and he often wore blackface during these roles, and that was just something he did. Can't I do that? And I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying, look, I'm making a film
Yeah,
about this guy's.
you're doing it for
Yeah,
historical accuracy.
yeah, and they're like, no, you can't do it, no matter what.
What about when Laurel and Hardy did blackface? I forget which movie this was, but they've been accused of a murder that they didn't commit, and the only people who really believe them are the black workers on this farm, and so to help disguise them, the black workers, cover their faces and their hairs in mud so they can just hide among them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't at all disrespectful, just the opposite, really.
Oh yeah. You know what's another? You
Oh,
know what's
June
another
4A,
example?
yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah, it's
Granny.
another. Oh yeah, there's also that one forbidden, cartoon. I forgot what it was called. It was like called "Scrub Me Down with a Boogie Blues" and all that, which had that famous thing. And everyone said, "Oh, that's racist. It's evil and all that." And I'm like, I actually watched it, and when you really think about it, it's actually kind of praising African American culture to a degree. Now, yes, the cartoon characters, they've got the stereotypical big lips and all that. But here's the thing, people: it's a freaking cartoon.
Well, cartoon caricatures are always about,
Yeah,
the like Elmer Fudd having the giant nose and things like that.
yeah. Yeah, that was the whole point. Elmer Fudd, Yosemite Sam, even Bugs Bunny, they were stereotypes of common character tropes back then.
And I'm sorry, but Steve Shive's such an idiot. Could you ask for a less racist TV show than the Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah.
It's racist because it glorifies the South. Oh, shut up.
Like if I recall correctly, the Dukes of Hazzard, they weren't even, racist. The only reason why they put
No.
the Confederate the Tennessee battle flag on their car was just because, they liked it, if I recall correctly.
Well, yeah, it was a racing car, and that was their racing symbol, which is why they also
Yeah.
had the O1 on the side.
Yeah.
But you had more black guest stars on the Dukes of Hazzard than you had in any other, even like into the 90s. How many black guest stars were on Friends or Seinfeld or shows like that? And in the Dukes of Hazzard, they were usually like someone in authority, like someone with the FBI was working with the Dukes to try and, take down Boss Hogg's criminal empire or something like that.
Uh, it's just I know I said this a long time ago, but when Anita Sarkeesian said everything is racist, everything is sexist, and you got to point that out. I'm saying if that's your worldview, then your solution you don't need to wake up. What you need is Valium.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it goes back to what you were pointing out of what I said in that one video. If everything is green, then green is meaningless.
yeah. And that's another thing too, that a lot of people that are trying to say, "Oh, boys and girls are the exact same thing. There's no difference," and all that, and all that. One thing that I've always irked me, and I brought this up, and people still refuse to answer, is like, okay, if it is true that apart from their reproductive organs, boys and girls are exactly the same thing, and all that. Then where did the stereotype come from? Where did people get this idea that boys need to act like this and girls need to act like this come from?
Pepe Le Pew, oh God, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a French actor that he was based on. And it's one of those things where his movies were supposed to be so romantic, and the women were just fawning of, oh, if only I could have a man like him. And was it Michael Maltese, or well, who was the director who created Pepe Le Pew? It was one of them. Was looking at that going, that guy's actually a pretty big ass.
Yeah.
That guy is like committing sexual assault on women.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, he was also based off of a friend of Chuck Jones, who was known to be a womanizer, but he often neglected, to take personal hygiene, so he would forget to shower because he would work so hard. So rather than take a shower, he would just spray himself with cologne, and that only made it worse. And he would try to pick up girls, and they'd be repulsed by his cologne that he would wear.
Well, the other the inspiration, I think the one you may be talking about was the other writer, Ted Pierce, and
Yeah,
he was both a workaholic and an alcoholic. He'd basically go from work straight to drinking, sleep in his clothes, come back in, and it'd be like that after a week, just like smelling awful rough, not even realizing it, and then go and try and chat up the girls in ink and paint.
yeah,
And they put a lot of that in there
yeah,
as kind of as kind of a rib toward him that apparently he never even got.
yeah. It's another thing that critics of Pepe Le Pew often forget about is that the cat, I think her name's Penelope. There were a couple of episodes where she actually, comes to like Pepe Le Pew and she goes after him. And what happens? Pepe's like, "Oh, Madame, control yourself, Madame, no!" Then he runs away.
Yeah, I remember. I forget how that got turned around.
Yeah, I once,
But yeah,
I
the
once
like
thought,
the reason and I forget the movie, but I think it was Cary Grant. The whole reason Bugs Bunny eats carrots is because of Cary Grant eating carrots in this one movie, and was supposed to be really charming because rabbits
yeah.
don't actually eat carrots. They don't
I
eat
mean, they
roots. They
do.
eat foliage.
I mean, they do. They can, but but if I recall correctly, a person said a rabbit eating nothing but carrots, it would basically be the equivalent of a human eating nothing but chocolate. It's food, but it's empty calories, and it's not going to be good for you in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it was either
And another
McKimson
fun,
or Jones, but I forget which one it
yeah,
was.
and another fun fact about Bugs Bunny is Mel Blanc, the original voice actor, he was allergic to carrots.
Yep. He had to
Yeah,
have a bucket beside him while they were recording so he could spit out the carrots because they tried like celery and other things, but none of it sounded like carrots.
yeah. Yeah, people fail to realize when Bugs is going, "Cup, cup, 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 what's up, Doc?" That was actually Mel Blanc's eating a carrot while he did it.
Yeah, because they couldn't find any other way to make it sound like a carrot other than to
Yep,
give him a carrot.
yep,
But he had to spit it out.
yep.
Pepe Le Pew was created by Chuck Jones and Michael Maltese. Okay, so yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, it was Chuck Jones.
That's another thing. Yeah, that's another thing that's really sad about those old cartoons, that people are not getting them.
Yeah, there are so many jokes that nowadays they were just riffing on so much pop culture of the time that you just completely miss out on.
Oh yeah, here's another fun fact about pop culture jokes being from the old Looney Tunes cartoons. You know the episode with the abominable snowman? Fun fact, that was actually a riff at, I think it was Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance in the film of Mice and Men.
Yep.
That's why he calls every person he comes across George, because it's based off of
Right.
Lenny. Yeah, yeah, George and Lenny. And I think that's also why he's obsessed with rabbits, is because in both the book and the film, the promise is that we're gonna get our own farm, and we'll have rabbits. And Lenny's like, yeah, yeah, and I can tend to the rabbits. I can tend to the rabbits, George. Hmm. That was a. I mean, I haven't read the book, but I did see one of the films, and that was a really heartbreaking film.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And I've heard some people criticize that film, saying like it's promoting ableism because he killed Lenny, but people fail to realize the reason why George killed Lenny was not because ableism, or because he didn't want to do with it. It's because the sad reality was that he did not mean to do it, but he killed a girl. It was by complete accident. But back in those days, they didn't view it that way. It's not like today where anyone could see that Lenny was not trying to kill the girl, so he would have been declared diminished responsibility and institutionalized. Back then, he would have been hanged.
Yep.
Yeah, and
That's
and
part of why it's so tragic.
yeah, that's the reason why he shot him, because at the end of the day, shooting Lenny in the back of the head was much more merciful than what the mob that was coming after him would have done to him.
Oh, and man, you want to talk about A lot of the stuff they did in cartoons, the Fleischer Brothers cartoons,
Oh yeah.
especially before the Hays Code,
Oh yeah.
those really old ones.
I mean, no joke. If I recall correctly, they did a lot of cartoons where Betty Boop, she's pretty much, basically naked half the time. I mean, obviously they didn't show too much graphics, for obvious reasons, but yeah, there's literal scenes of her where she's completely topless, and the only thing that's covering her no area is like a hula skirt, and it's very short.
And she's supposed to be an underage girl.
Oh yeah. Well, she was actually. Well, fun fact, she was actually a poodle in the original
But the idea is
cartoons.
she's a girl who's coming of age and
Yeah,
starting to have all those sexual feelings.
Oh yeah,
But even
don't get
in
me.
Warner Brothers, like in all the old harmonizing, Hugh Harmon and Rudolph Ising, like there were ones with Bosco and Honey where they had some nudity in it. There were
Yeah,
ones where it was an undersea one and there were mermaids and the mermaids didn't have any tops on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and really, if I recall correctly, the only reason why those naked cartoon characters didn't have physical anatomy wasn't because of censorship laws. It was just literally because animation was primitive back then. They could only do so much. Same reason. It's
Well,
the
and
same reason why.
they weren't trying to do detailed realistic anatomy.
Yeah, they were. Again, as we were saying earlier, the whole point of cartoons back in those days was over exaggeration. Like today, due to technology, we try to make even the most goofy cartoons somewhat realistic. Whereas back then, the whole point was to make them over exaggerated and cartoony because hey, it's animation.
Well, and the thing is, synchronized soundtracks were so new, people weren't used to them. And seeing all of these cartoon characters bounce up and down and move in exact time to the music they were hearing, that was a big phenomenon back in
Yeah,
those days. Because no one had experienced that before.
yep,
I mean, one of the first successful films was like a 7-second loop of a man sneezing. And audiences were packed in to see it, to watch that guy sneezing, because they had never
yeah.
seen anything like that
Oh
before.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing a documentary about movies, and I also remember one movie. It was called The Great Train Robbery. It was the first Western movie, and they talked about how it revolutionized, films with westerns and all that. And finally, they showed clips of the film, and yeah, The Great Train Robbery. It's only 12 minutes long.
Yeah, but it was doing a lot. Same as what was it? A Trip to the Moon. Everyone
Yeah,
knows that famous spot about the spaceship, landing on the moon's eye and the moon's facial expression changes.
yeah.
It's not that long a film, but it was so cutting edge in so many ways.
Oh yeah, when I was in a digital media class, we actually watched an iconic French film. It was a French film that was it was one of the first films to do jump cut edits in France, and it was called The Nightmare, and it's only 30 seconds long, and it's literally just a guy having a series of bad dreams in a row.
Almost like, and if you watch Nosferatu, it looks so primitive today, but when Nosferatu is killed because the sun comes up and he goes and then he just pops in and they do a jump cut and they replace it with the smoke, that blew audiences away back then.
Oh yeah.
To just have him just pop and turn into smoke. And also going back to Trip to the Moon with the spaceship in the eye. You start off, you have the moon, and it just jumps to the spaceship already in the moon's eye. Everyone who sees that swears they see the spaceship actually flying and hitting the moon in the eye. And it doesn't, it just jump cuts to it.
Yeah.
But your brain fills it in. Of course, now
Yeah.
audiences are a little more sophisticated about it, so you
Yeah.
got to be more
But
convincing.
sadly, we do tend to take things for granted. Like I remember that one. I think he was like Swedish or something. I remember that one Swedish guy. He was like a thing, and he did a TED talk one time, and he talked about how when he was 6 years old, there was a really big event in his household, and his mother was all excited. They even invited his grandmother and several of his aunts and uncles over. And what was this thing that they were so excited? they finally got a washing machine for clothes.
Yep.
Yeah. Because you got to remember, like when he was 6 years old, it was like the 1940s, and a lot of places did not have machines that wash clothes and dishes. And when they finally got one, like he said, like, and he was talking about how, no joke, my mother invited my grandmother over, and my grandmother was in tears because she did it the old-fashioned way. That's the funny irony too about it when you think about it, is that the dishwashing machine, the oven, and the and the clothes washing machine, they contributed to the feminist movement because, let's be real here, one of the reasons why women didn't really take a stand, and fight for their rights was because for many part of human history there was no practical reason to do so. But with technology making their jobs easier so they had more free time, it made them think, hey, I don't have to be in the house all the time. I can go out there and pursue a job.
Yeah, just think about, because I was an adult in the 90s, so you probably wouldn't even have to be a kid. But I guess especially if you're a kid, if you think back to all those films they made in the 90s that were the first films that have CGI in them, and just blown away by how realistic they were, you go back today and you look at them and it's, okay, yeah, it's kind of cheap now. I see that. But that's because we've grown more sophisticated as time goes on.
So some of them still hold up, like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. They're still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, some things don't, like when he goes into the helicopter and says, "Get out," with the synchronized lips, except they're not quite synchronized.
Yeah.
That, yeah. But at the time, it was so difficult to do because making him metal, he had to reflect the scene around him. And when Cameron told the effects people, it's like, and that's what it has to do. And they're like, okay, yeah, sir, no problem, sir. And then as soon as he leaves the room, they're like, how the hell are we going to do that?
Yeah, I've heard there's lots of stories about that, with films like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want to tell the guy that you can't do it.
Yeah.
Because you want to keep your job, but then you have to figure out how to do it, and then they innovated so many things for that movie.
Yeah.
And they were building all these tools from scratch. They couldn't just, download Blender, buy Houdini, go out with their camera and take HDR eyes of everything. They had to build all of those tools from scratch. So, I mean, you can go back and look at this and say, yeah, it doesn't really hold up, and it doesn't, but when you consider what they had to go through to make them.
Yeah.
They're standing on their shoulders.
Yeah. Or another good example that we didn't bring up, and this actually fits the Halloween theme, Jaws,
Yeah.
I mean, today a lot of people would look back at the shark and it's like, yeah, that shark's fake. It's clearly clunky, but I've seen a documentary about that, and there's interviews, with people who are in their 50s and 60s, and they said, "Oh, yep, I was 15 years old when that film came out, and it scared the crap out of me."
Yeah, that was pretty much the thing at the time. Everyone agreed that the shark looked fake. The shark totally looked fake, but also it scared the crap out of them. Yeah, it didn't matter that the shark looked fake because they got into the film and.
Yeah, that scene. Yeah, that scene where he's throwing the bait and the shark comes up. Modern audiences look at that and they're like, "Yeah, that's kind of fake." But a lot of people said, "Oh, when I saw that scene, I practically crapped my pants."
Turkey Tom, I've heard of that guy, but I don't think I've seen the video you're talking about.
Though I will say this about Jaws: the scene that still gets me even to this day is that scene where Hooper sees the decapitated head from the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that he did the he did the whole Psycho thing, where the scene leading up to it is super quiet and pretty chill, and then you see that head, and it's just that high pitched, screeching that you hear in Hooper's reaction.
Finding Zenithian says, one thing that pisses me off, those who support the Second Amendment while pissing on the other 9. Yeah, I've said this about the conservative Supreme Court justices. They seem to like the lower numbered amendments, but hate the higher numbered ones. They like the Second Amendment, and they're good on free speech. They're kind of on the Fourth on privacy. And then when it comes to things like the bail amendment and things like that,
Oh yeah, and
then
going
they're
back to the
just totally out to lunch, and they'll
and
let
going back.
through all sorts of ridiculous bail laws.
And I actually posted this on the biggest bogon emitter nominations about Connecticut. Unfortunately, there are so many states out there where you can bring up, and you can point out. You see, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Can't you see that all gun laws are unconstitutional? And they reply, well, that's true, but that only applies to the federal government. And in our state, we want safety, and we're gonna pass gun control.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't
and then of
get
course
that
there,
it's the supremacy clause, people.
yeah. Yeah, people fail to realize the Ninth and 10th Amendment only apply to things that aren't in the Constitution.
Yep. If it restricts the states, it still restricts the states. And
Yep,
one of the myths is that, oh, the 14th Amendment applied it to the states. No, no, no. The 14th Amendment made it clear that it applied to the states. It always applied to the states. The Supremacy Clause was what made that clear.
hmm. It's one amendment that nobody talks about, but I think it's really important. To and would fix a lot of the corruption issues within Congress. It's I forgot which amendment it was, but it's the amendment that says that senators are now voted in by the people.
Yeah, the 17th.
Yeah, whereas in the past they used to be nominated by state electors.
Well, the legislatures. Because that
Yeah,
way you made sure that you weren't taking too much power from the states.
yeah,
And if it hadn't been for them, you never would have gotten things like the Senate saying, because the federal government has no constitutional authority whatsoever to set a drinking age. Like
Yep.
it's illegal to consume alcohol if you're under 21. So most states had it at 18. And so Congress said, states, if you don't raise it to 21, we're going to withhold your highway funds. And they basically extorted them. Well, that had to get through the Senate. If the Senate had still been controlled by the state legislatures, they never would have gotten away with that.
Yeah, people think, that's the whole thing that I hate about people when they talk about how we need to save America's democracy. America was never supposed to be a democracy, and that was the whole point of the Senate.
And you see the problem there because the Senate has become this complete oligarchy.
Yeah, and because they're elected by the people, not by not by the legislators. Now the incentives have changed. Now rather than being like a neutral arbitrator between the representatives and the executive branch, now they're the same thing as the representatives, and they're career politicians. So now it's not about doing their job; it's about how do I get elected.
Yep.
Yeah.
To 6-year terms, not just 2.
Yep. Yep.
That's why the terms were so long, because they weren't supposed to be elected by the people. They were chosen by the state legislatures. And since you didn't want a case where every time a new legislature came in, they would just up in the Senate.
Oh yeah.
So they kind of did that to kind of spread everything out and
And
get a
sadly,
little more
instead they're
stability. But now it doesn't make any sense.
and they're trying to do the same crap at the Supreme Court now. They're like, yeah, why would the Supreme Court let us do what we want? We need to pass a law so they'll be more complacent. People fail to realize that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah. The Supreme Court is anti-democracy. Yeah, well, good. They're supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's the point. When democracy starts infringing on the people's rights, the Supreme Court is supposed to step in and put a stop to it.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And contrary to what some people say, while the SCOTUS has been doing a good job so far, they are still not the ultimate arbitrators of the Constitution, because the Constitution limits their power too.
Yeah, that's a common misconception, especially among libertarians, about Marbury v. Madison. And because a lot of them say, well, that was just the Supreme Court, grabbing a bunch of power for themselves. No, no, no. They were defining and making clear the constitutional separation of powers. These are the powers that the Supreme Court has. These are the powers that the president has. And these are the powers that Congress has. And you don't ever cross over from one to the other.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like the whole thing, when Roe v. Wade was like so many people were so many people were like, "Oh, the SCOTUS is overstepping their limit. They're banning abortion and all that." And it's clear they didn't read it because if you actually read what their ruling wasn't yeah, abortion is wrong. Let's ban it. It was listen. One of the reasons we're having this debate is because there's no mention of abortion within the Constitution. Yet the federal government approved it without the proper clearance. It's like, listen, if we're going to have this whole abortion debate, it has to be down. It has to be handled on the state level before it can get into the federal government because at the moment the federal government does not have the ability to determine whether abortion is legal or not.
Well, and
That's all
that's
it
what was
was.
so dumb about people like AOC saying, well, we got to make it so that the Supreme Court has no say in abortion. That's what the Supreme Court did. They said that we have no say in abortion. And that's
Yeah.
why they couldn't decide Roe and Casey the way they did.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that authority,
Yeah.
one way or the other, to ban it or to allow it, or either way.
Yeah, that was their whole purpose. The whole point that they were trying to say wasn't that abortion is wrong and it should be banned. It's just that listen, nowhere in the Constitution does it give the federal government the authority to ban or legalize abortion, but because Roe v. Wade was passed, that technically counted as the federal government, condoning it, but that's against the Constitution. So basically they're just saying, listen, let the states deal with it. Fun fact that many people have pointed this out. That was the whole thing with slavery too. Contrary to popular belief, the whole slavery argument wasn't the North wanted to ban slavery and the South wanted to keep it. Like there was fighting even amongst abolitionists. There were radical abolitionists that were saying, "Oh yeah, we should abolish slavery at whatever costs, Constitution be damned." And there were others who were more rational that said, "Listen, we want slavery to be abolished too, but it's got to be handled from the state level. The federal government can't just be declaring we here declare slavery wrong and we're going to abolish it no matter what." That was the whole argument.
Yeah, findings in, you got a point with Charles II, but also at the same time, compare Charles II to Oliver Cromwell.
Yeah.
you know?
I do agree though that some monarchists say, well, monarchies would be are better than democracies because monarchies, have an incentive to make their country stable and all that. Not 100% true.
I think it just means fewer targets when the revolution comes.
Yeah. I've actually heard
Because when you
one
got to get
person
536 of them,
yeah,
that's a lot of bullets.
yeah. I did hear one person jokingly say, one advantage that monarchy has over of democracy is that when things all go to shit and the revolution comes, who the problem is. Whereas unfortunately, in like what we have now, the reason why it's difficult to do anything is because when something is genuinely wrong and the federal government fucked up and they have no excuse they can do, what are they going to do? They're just going to all start pointing fingers at each other and say, well, it was him, he did it, no, he did it, no, he did it. That's the reason why the Tammany Hall got away with what it was doing back in the 1920s for so long, was because when they were finally exposed for their corruption, they all pointed fingers at each other.
Well, and even without outright corruption, it spreads out the sense of responsibility. So, you're a senator voting for something horrible, but you don't feel the weight of all the guilt if the rest of the senators went
Oh
along
yeah,
with it. And also the democracy fallacy, where something that would be considered horrible when done by a monarchy is considered okay when done by a democracy.
Yeah, it reminds me of that psychological test they did that one time. I'm not talking about the whole zapping the person, but it was a different test where they had a bunch of people. They told them, now this is a test to determine how good your sight and unit of measurement is, and they would have lines, and they were all of different sizes, and they had to point out which side, which was the longest line, and they did that for a while, and eventually they reached one line where and some of them were and the one person who was the test subject while the rest were paid actors, the paid actors were all told, now vote for the shortest line and say it's the longest, and many people who were rational picked the shortest line because everyone else was doing it.
Yep.
Hmm.
I remember that. I forget the name of the experiment, but I know the one you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, it's sad. That's another reason too why democracy is prone to failure is because, and many people will say that there is that pressure. Because here's the thing: as shocking as it is to believe, there are kind of sort of libertarians in Congress in both parties, and they are for small government spending. And how come they don't? And how come they don't do anything? It's because when they don't play by the game, the other senators and representatives just tell them, yeah, 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 just you know what, go over to the table, go over there, and just stay out of our way.
The Ash conformity experiment, that was it.
Yeah,
And the other one you mentioned was zapping people was the Milgram experiment.
yeah. Yeah, though I think the Ash experiment was much more accurate to determine, social peer pressure than the Milgram because
Well, and there's a lot of misinformation about the Milgram experiment because a lot more people resisted zapping the person than they just want to say, oh, well, as soon as it was a person, in a white lab coat, they just went along with it. No, they really didn't. And the ones who did, the ones who went, all right, the one with the triple X's that was supposed to imply death, when they were interviewing them after them, they're like, why did you do this? Like, it was obvious that this thing was fake the whole time.
yeah.
And they were just going along with it.
Another experiment that often gets overlooked, that often gets misconception is the Stanford prison experiment, because recently there's been a trend to say, oh, the Stanford prison experience was bullcrap because, the prisoners were faking it all and all that. But people were forgetting the reason why, like, the guys were faking, to go insane so they could get out of there was because the guards weren't letting them leave.
Yep.
The original plan was that the original plan was, listen, if there's a genuine reason for you to leave, you can leave. And there were many people that were telling the guards, hey, can we drop the act and let us leave this time? I've got a final coming up. And the guards were like, no, you're not getting out of here. You're staying in that cell. And
like, no, it was an experiment. You're supposed to be able to leave at any time. And
yeah,
it finally came to the guy's attention because it was a really badly run experiment. Finally came to the guy's attention when the parents of one of the guys were coming up to him saying, how can we get our son out of prison? He's like, what are you talking about? He can leave at any time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when he realized the things and it was only like 9 days into it or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing we can take out of the Stanford prison experiment is, like what we were saying earlier about the police, the problem isn't necessarily that we have prisoners and guards, it's what happens when the guards aren't being held accountable, because his job as the guy should have been to say, hey, he said he needs to leave, let him leave, and that's what we see with the police and, the corrections officers. They do what they do because their bosses don't do anything. All they care about is, okay, make sure the tickets are being signed, make sure the prisoners are staying in line, do whatever you want. So when a prisoner gets abused or denied, what their basic human rights, the guards will say, "Oh, he's just being a baby. He's just being a baby." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing that those prison movies and TV shows don't tell you. If you're going to be roped or beaten up, typically it's not going to come from the inmates, it's going to come from the guards.
You're far more likely to be raped by a guard than a fellow inmate.
Yeah. I'll be right back. I gotta go to the bathroom real bad.
All right, be quick. We got like 3 minutes left. Let's see what I can talk about in the meantime. Oh boy, there's another generative AI boycott from Gary Marcus, Professor Emeritus at New York University. Oh God, some of these titles. Calling for regulation to tame Silicon Valley. They have lost the plot and gone a very long way from don't be evil and becoming increasingly powerful with almost no constraint. I mean, that's true, but that's not about... And he's talking about cryptocurrency too. Most of that stuff's open source. That has nothing to do with the power of, Silicon Valley and big tech. The threat to democracy from automatically generated misinformation and deep fakes. Oh my God. We ought to treat mass-produced misinformation differently from individual citizen speech. It is one thing for my neighbor to have an opinion I disagree with, another for a foreign government or stock scammer to generate billions of lies a day, whatever. It's still the First Amendment. whether you say it once or whether you say it a billion times. There's not like a limit on it. It's not how the First Amendment works. There's a price war. Price war. Most of it's open source. How do you get a price war when it's open source, you idiot? It's just an excuse. Okay, I've had enough of this guy. I'm going to look for something else. Oh, now the whole click to cancel thing is a big one because they want to make it it's perfectly easy to cancel things like Amazon Prime. Yes, they want to keep you there, so they're going to give you like, hey, we'll give you a discount on another year. Well, maybe that'll convince you to stay with them. How are you harmed by being offered that? Oh God, robo-taxis are no friend of public transportation. Oh my God, our wonderful public transportation is going to suffer because of driverless cars.
Yeah.
I think the Robovan has given them a little bit of a scare, because now why do we need city buses? If anyone who wants to can buy some Robovans, and other people can compete with them, and we'll just do mass ride-sharing services. Who wants to go from one place to another and let the Robovan take care of it? What do we need government for? What do we need all those taxes for?
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that one joke that someone said that one time where they're like, but without government, who will build the roads? Well, there's a possibility that if it's up to the free market, we might develop a means of transportation that won't require roads.
Yep, we might make people movers or something. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I think another reason too why some governments hate the idea of cars and want to focus on public transportation is quite simply because they want to control where people are doing and going. Because don't get me wrong, public buses and all that, they have their uses, but when you really think about them, they have a lot of unseen costs that a lot of people don't think about. Like,
and doing it via ride sharing is much more efficient.
Yeah.
You can get instant competition. And I mean, Elon's even talking about like you just have your own Tesla, but you're at work or whatever, and you tell your Tesla, I'm going to be at work for the next 8 hours. Go make some more money for me while I'm at work. And it goes out doing ride shares while you're at work or whatever. As far as finding Zenithian's question, which day will next month's stream be on? We never know. It's just when we can fit it into everyone's schedule. Next month is going to be Thanksgiving, so that'll be fun trying to work that in. But anything else you want to discuss before we sign off?
Nah, I'm good.
Yeah. It is kind of exciting, though, watching all the technology happen and how disruptive it's going to be to a lot of things we've traditionally relied on government to do. Taxi services, bus services, public transportation, things like that. It's going to be very disruptive, and it's going to be a massive boom to people in small towns and rural areas and things like that, who are the ones who always get forgotten in this, because it's like, we need to get rid of cars and rely on public transportation alone. Okay, what are people out in farming country supposed to do? When the nearest store is like, a 20-minute drive or 30-minute drive or whatever from them. So,
well, by Mr. Beats logic, they only represent a small percentage of the population. Why should we have to suffer? Why should they get all these benefits? Yeah.
Yeah, the benefits of actually living their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's insane. So, that's it for this month. So just stay tuned, keep paying attention for whenever next month is going to be on. Thanks for fighting Zen for continuing to be our Rumble guy who keeps the Rumble chat going. And we had Mr. Merchant and Ray Mio and Connor Seymour over on the chat. Thanks, Chris, again. And thanks to everyone who's watching. This was actually a good one. We kept going the whole time and didn't have a single dropped frame, so I have no idea what was wrong last time. Maybe it'll work next time, and maybe it won't, but we'll see you then. Until then, stay strong and be free.